1983's Twice Upon a Time is a fascinating animated film for a variety of reasons. For starters, one word: Lucasfilm. Yes, George Lucas himself produced and financed this film through the Ladd Company. Beyond that, his creative touch isn't really present in the film itself, for the most part. Next, there's much to be said about the two people who directed the film: John Cordy and Charles Swinson. The project essentially began with Cordy, who sports a pretty lengthy filmography which mostly consists of television movies, but also some narrative features and even some documentaries, including the Oscar-winning Who Are the DeBolts and Where Did They Get 19 Kids? So, not exactly the guy you'd expect to be directing an animated feature film like this, but there's more to the story. Cordy had been working in animation for a good while prior to Twice Upon a Time, having directed numerous short segments on Sesame Street and The Electric Company. Cordy had developed his own backlit cutout animation technique, which he called loomage. This involved dozens of cutout pieces made from a synthetic fabric called Pellon being arranged on a light table and then moved around frame by frame. Twice Upon a Time is done in this style while also making use of a mixture of many other techniques, including animation on top of live-action footage, environments made from live-action still images, and many, many more that are way too complex for me to sum up briefly. Basically, it's like a mixture of the South Park pilot and Terry Gilliam's animations for Monty Python. The film's other director, Charles Swinson, was also an animation pro, having worked on Puff the Magic Dragon, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Rugrats, and creating the Cartoon Network show Mike, Lou, and Dog, until he retired from animation in the early 2000s and took up painting. Exactly how much creative input he had on this film, I'm not sure, but he deserves some credit nonetheless. So with these two creatives at the helm, a one-of-a-kind animation style, and even George Lucas's name attached, one has to ask, why is this so? Well, that's kind of a big can of worms. You see, the Ladd Company was on the verge of bankruptcy at the time, and they were faced with a choice for this film: limited release or worldwide release. Presumably not wanting to risk more financial losses, they went with the former option, but even then, this didn't work out in their favor. Thanks to the box office failures of both this film and The Right Stuff, the company ultimately went under shortly afterwards. But why did it bomb? Short answer: college students! Okay, it wasn't entirely their fault. John Cordy's intention was to make a family-friendly film, but when it was going through test screenings, producer Bill Cotturi noticed that college-aged audience members kept walking out on the film around 10 minutes in. So Cotturi panicked, and he brought voice actor Marshall Efron back in to record new, more profane dialogue in the hopes that it would keep the more adult audiences in seats for the whole film.
I know some of you have wives and sweethearts and all that malarkey. There's a good chance some of you won't be coming back. I can deal with that. I know some of you have girlfriends and old ladies and all that kind of crap. And you're probably expected to get into their feathers tonight. Well, let me just say, tough shit.
Evidently, it worked. Perhaps too well. Cotturi, likely on purpose, never informed John Cordy about any of these changes, and it wasn't until Cordy saw the film at its premiere that he finally found out. Understandably, he was pissed. Even after Cordy had this vulgar cut reprinted with his original clean version, many of the theaters screening it didn't bother to switch their prints out with the clean cut. Some of them even put it on a double bill with The Secret of Nim. And the result?
So come on, you garlic-breathing, garbage-sucking dipshits! Move out! I'm not talking tomorrow! Haul ass, you mothers!
Naturally, parents were outraged, and the film was pulled from theaters. After that, it just vanished for a long time. For decades, the only way to see it was either on a hard-to-find VHS and Laserdisc release from 1990, or if you were fortunate enough to catch it playing on cable one night. But like any pleasant fairy tale, the story does have a happily ever after, as the Warner Archive finally released the film on DVD in 2015. But there's no point stalling any further. Let's dive into Twice Upon a Time. I would let the narrator fill you in on the story here, but At the risk of breaching copyright rules for playing the whole intro, I'm gonna sum it up myself. Okay, so in this world, our reality is known as Din, and we're known as rushers because we're always rushing around all the time. Our happy dreams are brought from the land of frivolity and are delivered by an old dude named Greensleeves and his big men of imagination. Nightmares, those are made by synonymous Botch and an army of vultures that drop nightmare bombs on us while we're asleep. Basically, Botch wants us to have nightmares 24/7, and to do that, he needs to take control of the cosmic clock, which controls the passage of time in Din, and it's just a clock in a convenience store somewhere.
Everybody got that?
By the way, that opening camera move in the Merc, courtesy of David Fincher. Yes, that David Fincher. So the fake men are out on the job giving sweet dreams to people, when suddenly Botch's minions capture them in Greensleeves. But not before he sends out an SOS to Frivolity for his niece, an aspiring actress named Flora Fauna. However, the message doesn't reach her because, no joke, the chef of state here is illiterate.
Yes, sometime I'm gonna have to learn to read, and then write, and tie my shoes, and button my fly.
Ah, so this is how the Twitter support system works. Now it all makes perfect sense. Elsewhere, we meet our heroes. The mute Chaplin-esque Mumford and his shape-shifting sidekick, Ralph the All-Purpose Animal, voiced by the late great Lorenzo Music, whose voice honestly makes the character really adorable to listen to.
Yeah, I know, but how far? I mean, we could push it so far that it could be too far, or we could just push it a little.
You'll know when you get there.
They get into a mess at their job at this Happy Dream Factory because, I don't know. Beaker here was honestly the one who started it. Either way, they get demoted to garbage duty, but they can't even do that without something going wrong.
This is it. This'll do it. I got it. Wait up, Mom!
Anyway, the two of them find Flora Fauna, who's been digging through the trash to find that letter from Greensleeves.
Big's being kidnapped. Send help or all is lost. GS.
We could help.
You couldn't go to Din. Terrible things happen there.
Really? Like what?
Well, I'm not sure, but I know that you have to be a real hero to stay there.
Well, the Cold War was going on at this time, so I get paranoia. Back at the Merc, Botch spies on them and EW! Yeah. And he plots to trick them into doing his evil bidding, accompanied by his head screamwriter, Scuzzbopper, who's basically what you'd get if you crossed the DNA of Rayman, Clopin, and King Pooper from the Super Mario Bros. Porno. Yes, that's a thing that exists. Well, if that means this guy wrote that crime against humanity, I guess he's perfectly qualified to write our nightmares. Or, what is he even writing here?
My feet didn't notice as Oliver falling and thieves in the would not move was wearing my teeth came out falling and just closet snakes. I tried to underwear into her hand as I bit the under the bed, scream until I reached crumbling bits ground.
Oh my god. So, how does Botch lure our heroes in? He just invites them over to tea. Oh, I guess that's nice of him. I wish more villains would take that approach. Now, watching the movie, one thing that really stands out is the largely improvisational and rapid-fire nature of the dialogue.
It tells them that they don't have something.
Yeah.
And that there's a clock.
It's a clock.
And they watch it.
They watch it.
And it tells them
The time.
that they don't have.
Okay, you're on fire.
Currently.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Superheroes are very polite.
Skip polite. Go
The off-color banter between characters, especially ones with contrasting personalities, combined with the corresponding animation, really adds to the bizarre feel of the film, and it elevates it for being a conventionally written and paced narrative. So, Mumford and Ralph get sent off to Din to retrieve the mainspring from the cosmic clock and return it to Botch, unaware of his sinister ulterior motives.
As soon as all the bombs are delivered, I'll start time back up, and then I push the button. Kaboom!
Flora stays behind to pursue her career in showbiz by acting in Botch's nightmare studio.
The actual stages where I produce all the world's best nightmares. I record their screams and condense them into the essence of terror. Only the best, the most horrible are poured into my nightmare bombs.
You know, by this point, shouldn't you know that he's the villain here? I mean, come on, he's producing the exact opposite of what your uncle makes. That's gotta be a giant red flag, Miss Fauna. Anyway, Ralph and Mumford make their way inside the cosmic clock, but things don't go exactly as they'd hoped. Oops. But, right on cue, the mainspring comes hopping along and the pair try to stop it in its tracks. Now, some folks may complain about the choices of music in this movie. For an animated, off-color fantasy film like this, you probably wouldn't go in expecting the soundtrack to be full of hopeful radio mainstay 80s pop tunes. Most of the time, it actually works pretty well. The opening tune, Heartbreak Town, properly sets the mood for the movie, in that it tells you up front that this isn't just your average fairy tale, and that you're getting something quite unexpected, much like the song itself. Not to say the song on its own goes along that much with the themes of the movie. And the pleasant tune in the scene of the Fig Man going about giving people sweet dreams works well with it too.
Just a picture in your mind.
And the end credits title theme is also a nice tune to close out the film on a happy note. This one scene here, though, is the only place where I think it doesn't work that well. It doesn't really suit the frantic and wacky tone of the events happening on screen. But hey, if the soundtrack batting average is 3 for 1, then I wouldn't call it a fatal flaw with the film. So, Botch's minions steal the spring, and our heroes are now in a pickle. But thankfully, a fairy godmother...
Just call me FGM. I hate excess verbiage.
Oh, right, sorry. FGM shows up from out of the blue to set the record straight with them.
Look, Botch is a schmuck, a bad man. He's got Greenie, the figs, he makes all the nightmare bombs for the whole world, and he wants nightmares forever, so you guys have to stop him. Better take these 3 dimes.
Dimes?
Yes, they're magical. You get in any real trouble, you toss one in the air, a phone booth appears. Personally, I don't understand it.
When they once again find themselves getting nowhere, they call her up and she sends over a quote-unquote superhero named... yes, thank you. Who seems to be rather preoccupied with skipping to the get the girl part of the job.
A girl?
Right.
Distressed damsels are my meat and potatoes. Where do I find her? Just point me in the right direction.
But we gotta find the spring first.
They head into the frozen city to search for the spring, only to find an office littered with undetonated nightmare bombs. Unfortunately, Mumford accidentally sets one of them off, and they find themselves in the middle of a wide-awake nightmare directed by Henry Selick. Yes, that one. This scene is easily one of the highlights of the film, containing some of its most unique visual trickery unlike anything else I've seen in any other animated movie. It's really something to write home about.
So that was a nightmare. Jeez, that was awful.
Still not as scary as those dreams where I'm trapped outside naked.
Nightmares. And
What? We all have those. So our heroes, once again stuck in a rut and their morale at an all-time low, are poofed out of there by the FGM, who gives them some less than encouraging advice.
Get out of the business. Do something else. Take up basket weaving. You're fired.
Now, I don't have much bad to say about this film, but if I had to criticize something, I'd say that there's not a whole lot of emphasis on character development. Not to say any character is badly written, no, but more that they're not written enough. The way their personalities play into the story, i.e. Ralph and Mumford being clumsy screw-ups with good hearts, Rot Rescue Man, the hero that's too focused on getting the girl, Flora being an aspiring actress, etc., all serve their purpose in some way, big or small, throughout the film. But in some cases, those personalities just feel like, well, plot devices. I feel like they should have devoted more time to developing at least Ralph and Mumford to create a bit more room to empathize with these characters more, to properly root for them to succeed on their journey. But hey, it's not a big enough flaw to ruin the whole film, so It's not really that big of a complaint. These characters are all fun to watch and very likable. I just feel like they could have been given a bit more to do. So, despite the FGM's reverse pep talk, Ralph and Mumford are undeterred and vow to save the day no matter what.
We're heroes, you know.
I'll believe it when I see you.
Well, you just watch, you'll see it.
While all this has been going on, Rod rescues Flora.
Flora, that bully hit you.
And attempts to put the moves on her at his crib, dare I say.
I even have muscular lips.
Get out! Wait, you stupid sex maniac! Goodbye!
Anyway, our heroes nearly beat their doom at the hands of a big serpent thingy, but before you can say Deus Ex Machina, Flora crashes down on its head in the nick of time.
Flora?
Wait a minute, something seemed off about that. Let me review that footage real quick. Okay, yeah. Yeah, and wait, yep, aha! There! Laser beam just before Flora landed on its head, clearly came from Han Solo's blaster, he shot first. Lucas was on both films, that's the connection, case closed. Now that our heroes are back together, they venture into Botch's castle to take him down, with the help of Scuzzbopper, newly reformed after Botch threw out his prized manuscript. Or maybe it's the screenplay to Alejandro Jodorowsky's Dune, I can't be sure. No wonder it seemed so insane.
It was great, just the same.
So they make it up to Botch's lair, rescue Greensleeves and the Figmen, and Ralph and Mumford face off against Botch once and for all.
Leave the ball alone, it's ugly. Oh, shit.
I didn't edit that in, by the way. That shit is in both versions of the film.
In the arms of the angel.
Ah, I see he took his strategy from using the cape in Super Mario World. Just fly over everything and you'll be fine. Yes, I know that was 1991 and this is 1983, just roll with it. So, Ralph throws Botch off and makes him push the big red button too early, causing all the nightmare bombs to go off while time is still frozen and rendering his evil plan totally moot.
Stop, they're not awake! They're not feeling my nightmare! No! Never! It's too much to bear! I want my blankie! I want my mama!
Don't worry though, he'll be okay. I think.
Hold on a little tighter. Put me down someplace safe, okay? Why are you looking at me like that?
Anyway, the day is saved, our heroes bid each other farewell, and the flow of time and din is restored to a normal, leisurely pace where the rushers can now take the time to stop and smell the roses. At least until cell phones come along. And of course, the FGM stops by one last time to commend Ralph and Mumford on their heroism.
You guys did really good. Congrats on that.
Oh, I just remembered we have a dime left.
Isn't that honest? Keep it. You'll need it.
They didn't. So that was Twice Upon a Time. It's an odd little movie. While it's a bit slim on the character side and soundtrack dates it a bit poorly, its visual style and off-color nature are more than enough to make it worth checking out. It's honestly a huge shame that this movie got swept under the rug for such a long time. Honestly, part of me feels like if not for Lucas's name being on it, it would have more likely been forgotten for much longer. If you've got money to spare, go buy the DVD from Warner Archive. It's got both versions of the film, and an audio commentary track from John Cordy and many other crew members. It's well worth your time and money. So, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Real Obscure Show.
I will